So to kick us off, I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Manuel Pastor, the director of USC's Equity Research Institute and a board member of Unite LA for opening remarks. Welcome.
Thank you, David. So pleased to be with you this morning at this unveiling of the data dashboard from the LA Compact and Unite LA. And what I wanted to do is to set the stage by noting what a significant moment we're in and how this is part of a response to that moment. We are finally, it seems, emerging from the COVID crisis. But COVID was the disease that revealed our illnesses as a society, the racial wealth gap that left so many desperate, the digital divide that left so many on the wrong side of being able to learn remotely, the lack of access to health insurance and good health care, the tremendous disparities in pay and position in our economy. And the damage of COVID is going to be long lasting. It's already showing up in the data with regard to youth outcomes, with regard to job prospects, with regard to perhaps permanently baking in some of the racial inequalities that have persisted for such a long time. And we're at a broader turning point globally, nationally, and locally. Globally, it's kind of terrible that we are having this on the day of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and really a kind of signal of the rising forces of fascism in the world. Nationally, we've got the challenge of a society that seems to be pulling apart, that is unable to deal with the demographic change that's occurring in America. And we are at a turning point locally, both statewide and citywide, as we're about to have a new mayor, we have a new head of the Los Angeles Unified School District, a new opportunity. So what do we need to do? Well, I'm a lapsed Catholic, and so I always think things come in three. And I think we need data, deliberation, and destiny. We need to make sure that we've got the data metrics that help make clear what the issues are in our economy in terms of inequality. In our studies looking at metropolitan regions across the United States, those that make progress on equity and prosperity are those that put in place data systems to make sure that we can focus in on the challenges that we face, that can highlight racial inequality, that can highlight disparity, that can help us target resources to those who need it the most. But data alone does not do the trick. We also need deliberation. And what we found looking at regions across the United States is that those data dashboards need to become a platform for conversation between the different sectors that need to address the problems of inequality. And in this particular case, pre-K and childcare, K through 12, higher ed, and our workforce and economic development systems to make sure that they are aligned and also centrally focused in on these issues of racial inequality and prosperity for the next generation. But data and deliberation are not enough. We also need destiny. We need to craft a sense of us as a region, of us as a people, so that we don't get divided. And so that we recognize a couple of key things. One is that when we are talking about investing, in particular in Black and Latino or Latinx youth in Los Angeles County, that these are our children. No matter where we come from, no matter what our community, the disparities that exist, the ways in which they leave young people behind, that's the future of Los Angeles County. These are our children. We need to make these investments. And we also need to recognize that tackling equity is actually key to generating prosperity. There is a myth that there is a trade-off between what is fair and what will generate prosperity. And maybe at times inclusion can come at the cost of economic growth. But study after study is showing that those regions that close the gaps are actually the regions that are able to generate long-term prosperity in the future. And it just makes sense. When you're locking people out from the labor market because you're over incarcerating, you're wasting talent. When you are locking out immigrants because they don't have the appropriate status, you are locking out entrepreneurship. And when you do not invest in our youth of color to make sure that they can succeed, you are damaging the long-term prosperity of our regional economy here in Los Angeles. So I can't tell you how excited I am about the unveiling of the dashboard, how excited I am about what's going to be talked about today. Not only because of the issues that I've talked about, but because I am one of those people who have two parts of my soul. One part, which is actually really dedicated to the values of social justice and equity, and another part, which is a complete data nerd. And this data dashboard is bringing together those two parts of my soul. So I could either this morning be doing therapy about this bifurcation of my soul or listening to this presentation. I choose this presentation, and I think we should all choose a better destiny for Los Angeles County. David.
Thank you, Dr. Pasteur, for that inspirational sort of kickoff to this. And bless you for your leadership that you continue to provide for all of us. So with that inspirational sort of opening, let me just share a little bit about the compact and put a little context around the dashboard we're going to share with you. The compact is a bold commitment to close the education and workforce gaps caused by systemic inequities and systemic racism. Convened by the Unite LA, the coalition of the compact includes leaders across sectors who are committed to improving LA's Cradle-to-Career systems. We have 23 signers of the LA Compact that include leaders such as Mayor Garcetti, UCLA Chancellor Gene Block. You see on the screen here the many organizations that are part of the LA Compact. And the core of the work of the Compact is that we align to each other, as Dr. Pasteur just referenced. So the alignment starts with having unified goals. So we have 5 goals that all of the Compact partners designed together, and you see those on the screen. And then we measure the goals together. And so the dashboard is meant to be the most comprehensive database that look at these regional outcomes from early care and education to K-12 to higher ed and to the workforce. We understand this unique systems approach is to get us all working together to prepare young people. And we believe that promoting equity means starting early, like Dr. Pasteur just said, and working together through the entire developmental curve of a student. The Compact is the only effort that really brings together all the stakeholders for LA County's Cradle-to-Career systems to chart a future so that our youth grow up ready with the skills needed to thrive and to succeed in the jobs of the future. The Compact dashboard itself is meant to be a data lens so we can look at those measures and keep the region accountable to its education and workforce goals. But I want to add, in an era where when the Compact was formed, that data was often used as a weapon, our approach with the Compact is that data is a tool. And so our hope is, as we present this to you today, you think of these as tools for us to inform ourselves and to improve our systems and our performance for our youth. So what we're unveiling today is a new web-based format that makes it easy for anyone working on these issues to access this data. The future of our Cradle-to-Career systems is at a unique crossroads, with leadership changes happening, as Dr. Pasteur mentioned, at the LAUSD, at the city, at the county. We're extremely excited to learn that Superintendent Alberto Cavallo has a history of data-driven work, and we look forward to continuing to strengthen LA Compact's partnership with the district, with LA Unified, and with all of the partners that are leading the use of data to drive performance for our students. I want to just thank our funders that support the dashboard and the work we do. You see them on the screen. And with that, I'll introduce Dr. Lisa Catanzarite, who is the United LA Vice President of Research and Evaluation and has led the work to develop the compact dashboard. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Manuel, for setting the stage so eloquently and underscoring the importance of data and collaboration as we plan an inclusive recovery for Los Angeles. As David noted, the LA Compact's collective impact efforts focus on 5 big Cradle-to-Career goals. And all of the Compact partners have signed on and agreed to a set of shared metrics to track the region's progress against those goals. So with the help of my partner and colleague, Ariana Oliva at Unite LA, we're going to provide a quick overview of the dashboard and then show a few key charts before moving into today's panel conversation. So Ariana, thank you. So Ariana is going to show the link to the dashboard, and we're putting it into the chat so you can follow along and click through yourself as we go through a few of the features and then charts. So Ariana, could you please go to the landing page now? And we're going to show you just a few elements on the landing page. Again, the data will be intended to inform this conversation today. If you could scroll down a bit, please, just to show folks what's on the landing page before we go into the data. So this box on the upper right, process for identifying metrics. This explains how we came up with the metrics that we're tracking. So the Unite LA Research and Evaluation team convened a work group, the LA Compact Data Work Group, with institutional researchers and data experts from across the Compact institutions, including Dr. Kim Hall, who's on today's panel, and several other folks who are participating today. So that document, that link, Ariana, could you just click that so people can see? We're not going to go into it, but just so folks can see exactly the process that we went through to identify what the key metrics would be to track progress against our 5 goals. And all of those were approved by the Compact signers in the end. And we owe a huge debt to the members of the LA Compact Data Work Group. Ariana, if you could click back out and just show folks some of the other elements on that landing page. And again, for the data nerds, you'll be interested in, not just Manuel, I'm hoping there are a few other data nerds on today's call. You'll be interested not just in that document process for identifying metrics, but also the methodology link, which takes you to our technical appendix. I also want to note that we have LinkedIn related resources. We won't click into that, but this link provides some complementary links to complementary data sets, including Manuel's California Immigrant Data Portal, including dashboards and reports from First 5 LA, from LAUSD, from a number of our higher education institutions, from the LA Economic Development Corporation that Bill leads, and the Neighborhood Data for Social Change effort at USC. If you have other resources that you'd like us to link, please reach out. We'd be happy to add those. We intend this to be a one-stop shop for the key Cradle-to-Career metrics in the region. And I just want to thank our funders as well, the Annenberg Foundation, as well as the Compact partners who contributed to the Compact Operational Fund that made the dashboard possible to date. So Ariana, could you now click into that orange button to get into the dashboard? And just to show you how it's organized, we have a table of contents on the left. Thank you, Ariana. And I know this is probably small on people's screen, but this shows you each of the metrics that's included in the dashboard. Ariana, could you just scroll down and let people see like the whole list before we click into a particular chart? And I just want to note that we are constantly updating, adding data. You saw that bottom line said coming soon. We have a few coming soon items. And then Ariana, could you go back up to the top, please, and show that bar across the top? In addition to the table of contents, you can get into the different metrics for each of the compact goals by clicking into those buttons across the top. So we're going to start with the cradle end of the spectrum, really cradle. So this is one of our metrics for school readiness, low birth weight. And Ariana, if you could show, yeah, there you go, so people can see the legend. This is the least proximate to our compact goals, but an important metric, and perhaps we can get Dr. Kim Hall to explain why this metric matters so much in understanding school readiness. I'll note here the huge discrepancy between Black babies and other babies in terms of low birth weight. The share of Black babies who are underweight has dropped in recent years, but still it's almost double that for white babies, and certainly an area of concern. And there's a ton of research in this space. Just in case you're wondering what's behind this, I'll give a little foreshadowing in case Kim doesn't get to this. This is not because people don't take prenatal vitamins, or there's some issue that Black women are in control of. The research is suggesting that systemic discrimination takes a toll on Black women. And some of that is supported by comparisons of African American immigrants from Africa and their children over generations. I won't belabor that too much, but anyway, let's go into one of our K-12 goals. Thanks, Ariana. If you could go into the high school graduates eligible for UCs and CSUs. Thanks. So this chart shows nested geographic regions. It shows in blue LAUSD, in orange LA County, and in green the trend for California. These are high school graduates who have completed all of their A through G course requirements and are then eligible for entry into the state's public four-year institutions. You'll see that LAUSD made tremendous progress over the years, coming from behind in 2011 to surpassing the rates for the county and the state. LAUSD had a big dip during the pandemic, down to 46% of graduates, but in 2021, now bounced back almost to the pre-pandemic rate. And then Ariana, if you can just show on the right-hand side that there is a drop down there for to break out these data by race and ethnicity. That's true on a number of our charts. And then if you can switch now to the LACCD transfer course completion in English, great. So in LACCD and other community colleges, students have to pass particular courses to be eligible for transfer. This shows rates of attempting in light blue and passing in dark blue transfer English courses. So you can see a really nice upward trend over the past several years. Hopefully Francisco will be able to elaborate on a number of the trends in LACCD. Again, there's a drop down for this chart for comparisons by race and ethnicity. And then just to show another higher ed chart, we don't have our CSUs represented on today's panel, but let's look at the overall transfer grad rate. There is a separate chart for this one on transfer grad rates by race and ethnicity. So this shows graduation within 2 years of transfer in green and within 3 years of transfer in that golden color. Obviously, we would love more students to be graduating 2 years post-transfer. That rate is at 42%, is still lower than we'd like it to be, but both of these outcomes have been improving in recent years, so that now 71% of students as of 2021 of transfer students are graduating within 3 years. And this is in the CSU, what we refer to as the CSU 4, which are the 4 local LA area CSUs. We have a number of metrics for the CSU 4 on our dashboard where we have combined data across all of the institutions so that we can look at aggregate rates for our region and not be comparing one CSU with another. That's not, what the compact is generally about. As I mentioned, we are adding data all the time. I'm going to ask Ariana to show disconnected youth by race and ethnicity. These are the latest data, the American Community Survey, which is the basis of our unemployment and employment data, as well as the disconnected youth data, They're rolling out the 2020 and 2021 data next month, and we'll be adding those to the dashboard. What we have here shows disconnected youth rates, and that is youth who are neither in school nor working over the past several years. And this chart is the breakout by race and ethnicity. We have teenagers on the left and 20 to 24-year-olds on the right. You can see that, pre-pandemic, the rates were dropping for 20 to 24-year-olds. Rates for Black youth are still far higher than those for other young adults. We expect that these rates just blew up during the pandemic. So, we look forward to tracking that and moving to action, as the title of today's session indicates. Once we see these data, how do we then as a region address the ongoing issues with our youth, with systemic racism, in order to best prepare them? So I encourage folks to use the dashboard, to explore it yourselves, use it in your work, check back for data updates, new charts that we'll be adding, new disaggregations. Later this year, we'll be adding some metrics from our partners at the LA City Education and Workforce Development Department, the county's WEDAC's Workforce Development and Aging Services Department on programmatic workforce outcomes. And again, we're hoping to add further disaggregations as we move forward, not just by race and ethnicity, but also by gender, for foster youth, and other breakouts that folks might suggest to us. So again, the dashboard is intended to be a tool to ground and guide our efforts and inform our planning for the region's recovery and our attention to persistent systemic racism, to inform what Manuel referred to as give us the 3 Ds. I love that: data, deliberation, and destiny. So I'd like to ask everyone to use the chat function to answer a few questions that we're going to place in there, asking, will you use the dashboard? How will it be helpful in your work? And what other data or disaggregations would you like us to add if we can? If you have any general questions about the LA Compact, please direct them to my colleague Ariana. We'll put her email in the chat, and any questions around the data dashboard, please direct them to me. Again, my email will be in the chat. And just a shout out to Ariana and to the whole Unite LA team. Thank you all. And with that, I will turn this back over to David and our illustrious panel.
Thank you, Dr. Cadentez-Day, and thank you, Ariana, for your presentation. We have a terrific panel for you today, so I'll just briefly introduce them. Most of them are well known by all of you. We have Bill Allen, the President CEO of the LA County Economic Development Corporation, Kelly Gonez, the LA Unified School Board President, Dr. Kimberly Hall, the Chief Data Officer for First Five Los Angeles, and Chancellor Francisco Rodriguez, the Chancellor of the LA Community College District. So welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation. So I'll kick it off with just a broad question for each of you. Maybe I'll ask Kelly Gonez if you want to go first. Just what are some of the perspectives that you have when you see that data from the K-12 perspective?
Well, thank you so much, David, and thank you to the whole Unite LA team for having me. I think that the dashboard is a really powerful tool, and it's exciting to think about how we could leverage that in our work in our preschool through adult programming in LA Unified. I will acknowledge that I joined a few minutes late, so I maybe missed some of the highlights of the data. But in general, I mean, I think that this type of dashboard is so critical because we know that our communities and our students have been so deeply impacted by the pandemic, the economic crisis that it has created, but also, as was stated, by systemic racism. And so we need these data to better understand and pinpoint exactly where our students, families, and schools are, so that we can best be responsive. We know that there are great holistic needs, but it's not about a one-size-fits-all approach in our schools, and it's not about expending dollars for the sake of expending dollars. We really need to be tailored in our approaches for how to meet the unique needs of our students and families, and these kinds of data will get us there.
Thank you, Kelly. And I will just take moderator prerogative to congratulate you on recruiting this amazing superintendent to move across the country and come to LA. Francisco and I have each had the privilege of meeting with him privately, and he just wowed us. So we immediately came to understand the wisdom of the decision you and your fellow board members made and the success of recruiting him. And I acknowledged earlier in my comments, as we looked at his 5-year strategic plan, we're very impressed with his use of data and his focus on student outcomes. So we look forward to our work with him. Let me go next to Francisco Rodriguez. Chancellor Rodriguez, what are reactions you have?
Yes, well, thank you and good morning, everybody. Muy buenos días. It's good to see my colleagues here on this panel, as well as those who are joining us from various organizations throughout Los Angeles. My first reaction is what a beautiful ecosystem we have here of education, nonprofit, business, technology groups, all inspired and all moved by this idea that we can lift Los Angeles and not just recover, but prosper in a way that is more equitable and more inclusive and more prosperous for the communities that have been systemically marginalized, perhaps even ignored for too long. So I'm very, very pleased to do that. What my initial reactions, first of all, is that, pleased that this investment, and we need to not look at these kinds of opportunities as costs, but indeed investments. I firmly believe that that which we don't measure does not improve. So this gives us an opportunity to think about those matters very, very seriously. I also like the opportunity to disaggregate the data. That's a nice piece. As we look at our various communities, multilingual, multicultural, income stratified communities, this gives us a better sense of providing very specific, tailored solutions, strategies, interventions that will help to lift those needs from the data that is disaggregated. And then the last thing I'd mention, just again, very pleased with what I'm hearing and seeing, and very proud to be a part of this. LACC, as you know, is one of the original signers of the LA Compact, and we continue to believe in its mission and its purpose. But this fuels and inspires, I think, greater cross-sector collaboration. So, and I think that's indicated by the folks who are on this line, our panelists, and the tremendous convening power that the LA Compact, Unite LA, and our funders who support us have. So I'm looking forward to again, lifting better understanding so we can lift Los Angeles together.
Thank you, Chancellor. Dr. Hall, what perspectives do you want to share?
Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to just really agree with my fellow panelists about how exciting it is to have all of this data in one place. That's really looking at how our children are doing from their earliest years throughout their K-12 experience and into the workforce. One of the things that I, really want to just emphasize beyond the data that was presented here is really how COVID has devastated the child care sector. We have asked child care providers to continue their operations with less revenue and with increasingly strict health and safety requirements. And they have done all that they can to serve children, but we've seen that there are over 20% of our providers have closed in LA County. And while the data that we have on the dashboard doesn't speak to that, we are greatly concerned about the infrastructure in early childhood and the ability to continue to support young children during their very formative early years.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. It is sobering. We were producing the compact data measures in a written form, and we just realized that it was just too slow. So that's why we moved to this digital version. And we're going to need your help, all of your help, to feed that in a more dynamic way. So this is an exact moment where we know data we see that's 2 years old does not say how our babies and our children are doing today. So Bill Allen, opening perspectives, or do you want to even launch into a little bit of like, what challenges are employers facing right now in this region? But I'll leave it to you to go general or go specific.
Sure, David. Well, first, let me start by thanking you and Chancellor Rodriguez as chair, and Lisa and everyone on the Unite LA team for your leadership in general general on this subject, for bringing us all together today for the unveiling of this important dashboard, which, as the prior speakers have indicated, allows us to really measure the progress we're making in really the most important investment we make in this region, and that's in our own future, our children's future, and the future, just from a narrow perspective as head of the LADC, of our economy. Our regional economy competes on talent. We are not the low-cost place to do business in America, but we have an incredibly diverse and abundant workforce, and the extent to which we invest from the earliest ages of our children in ensuring their ability to compete for opportunities in society, in our economy, in government, the better our future will be. So I am somewhat concerned about what the data points will look like during the pandemics, and some of these data points were only available prior to the pandemic in the present dashboard. But I therefore hope that all of us who have the capacity to contribute to this dashboard, data that will be relevant to our ability to measure our progress and make systems change adjustments, that we will provide that data as transparently, as quickly, and in as disaggregated a fashion as possible to ensure that no one's being left behind.
Thank you, Bill. I'll start my next question. I want to just remind all of our listeners too, please put your questions in the chat, and we're going to try to get to your questions later. But Chancellor Rodriguez, college and community college enrollment declined drastically during the pandemic, of course. What has LACC been doing to address this? And what resources do you need that we can all work on together to get our students back into the classroom?
Yes, thank you. That's been one of the outcomes of this, the impact of the last couple of years. We need to think about this process of engagement that we have had with our students, with our community, with our business philanthropic partners. We're going on 100 weeks now. Think about that. 100 weeks of transition, of trying to anticipate, and for half of that time, roughly, we didn't have a vaccine. So we were dealing with an invisible, ambiguous devastation that has, as we all know, shined a very bright light and exacerbated some of the inequalities and inequities that existed well before the pandemic. So our responsiveness over the last 100 weeks has been to try to shore up and invest in areas that we know make a difference. In a very interesting way, we only shut down our schools, our colleges, our 9 colleges, for less than a week in the last 100 weeks. And we have had to deliver. The delivery mode has been different. It's been clearly mostly hybrid and online, principally. We were about 80-20 on ground to online before the pandemic hit us, but now we're about 2/3 online and 1/3 on ground. And that has left us with not serving in that modality about 20+% less students this year than we did last year. And even more tragically, about 30% less students this year than last year. Not necessarily the head count, but the number of units that they're taking. The head count is also down. And what we have seen is that when we disaggregate the data, that's why these kinds of dashboards are so important. Who has been hardest hit are students 24 to 36, 38 years of age, mostly women, mostly brown and black. So they're telling us that the economy is pulling people out, that this COVID environment has had a disproportionate impact on different types of people. For example, those who have been able to navigate this pandemic are those who are insured, employed, with education, connected to technology, and housed. Those who have been hit hardest, and I think Dr. Hall mentioned some of this, are those who are uninsured, unemployed, have a little bit of education, disconnected to technology. And Bill has worked really hard on the digital equity gap here in Los Angeles, and those who are hungry or poor. So the good number of students that we serve at LACCD and at LAUSD, to my partner Kelly, are in the persons in that latter category. So we should not be surprised that the outcome of the devastation of those who are unhoused, uninsured, hungry, disconnected, etc., has led to a lower enrollment drop. We don't have compulsory education in higher ed, yet we know that most students will need some level of post-secondary education for the jobs of the 21st century. So we have a gap that exists, and we're getting after it. We're finding out why students are not returning, to describing interventions that I'll get to later, perhaps, as to how we're getting students back in the classroom. But right now, the economic pool and the devastation of the COVID has led to an enrollment drop. But we have delivered. We are open. We have not closed. We've changed our modality clearly, but our zeal, our interest in serving this community has not waned. Our 9 colleges remain completely open to higher education.
Thank you, Chancellor. So Kelly, I'll come back to you. Again, as I mentioned, we're excited about this new superintendent. We know he's moving to a foreign land, our neighborhoods of Los Angeles. Big change for him. It's been a lifetime in Miami. What can we do to support you and the board and the superintendent as he gets to know the LA landscape and the LA constellation, and he gets to know the data and the real numbers, which we know he gets that, but also the people and the fabric of our community?
Thanks, David. Well, I too am very excited about Superintendent Carvalho's arrival. And I think that he has really hit the ground running and is so eager and to get to know the various communities of Los Angeles, all the diversity that exists here. And importantly, I think fully acknowledges that he must learn in this context, that while he has a lot of expertise and an incredibly impressive track record from Miami, that those experiences aren't necessarily directly transferable to LA. And it is really about understanding what is already working in our schools, because there are so many great things happening, but also learning directly from those who are most impacted by the challenges that we face. So I think on the one hand, certainly welcoming him with open arms and being there for conversations and to really teach him about the work that each of our individual sectors do and how that interacts with the success of our kids in our K-12 system is one thing. And then on the other, I think it's about creating some space for him to lead. I think that the work that we face in the school district is really challenging. It was challenging before COVID, and now as we're dealing with all of the significant impacts on students and families, on our staff, we need space to really dig into those challenges and make some changes that are necessary. And so I think being there to support us as we work through that and to support him as he works through that is really important. The one other thing I would note is I know that he's really excited about the opportunity to build really deep and sustained partnerships outside of the school system. I know that there have been fits and starts of that. The district maybe is not always the most welcoming partner to those from the outside. And I think he's really interested in changing that. And so I think I would welcome us all to think about how can we work on really bringing the full ecosystem and all of the cultural and economic riches of Los Angeles to bear in our public schools for the benefit of our students and our families.
Thank you, Kelly. And thank you for being a supporter of the LA Compact. And his response to me when I asked him was very favorable. I'm sure you encouraged it. So let me shift back to Bill, and then I'll come to you, Kelly, with a different question. But Bill, tell us a little bit more about what challenges are employers facing in filling jobs generally or COVID specific. I'll leave that to you, Bill.
Sure. Well, thank you, David. Employers are definitely struggling to find workers with the skills that they need. I should point out that we lost 772,000 payroll jobs to residents of LA County in the spring of 2020, in just 2 months. Imagine 772,000 of our neighbors. We could fill SoFi Stadium 10 times with the people who were displaced from their employment. Good news is, in the intervening 100 weeks, we've recovered about 500,000 of those jobs. Bad news is we still have 270,000 that have not been recovered. And that's in addition to more than 100,000 people who were unemployed even prior to the pandemic. So with 300,000 or 400,000 of our neighbors unemployed, you wouldn't think that employers would be having difficulty filling jobs. The problem is in the matching of skills. Some workers have been hesitant to return to work. We understand understandable fears of contracting the virus or bringing it home to loved ones. Others have had the time with the unprecedented amount of federal and state support to individuals to rethink their careers or to retire early. This presents some challenges for employers, but also presents opportunities for people in the labor market who are seeking work. The question is, do they have the requisite skills that employers are looking for? Skill requirements are changing rapidly. They have been for a great many years due to technological changes, globalization, climate change, all the mega forces that are at play in our economy and society. They changed even more rapidly as a result of the pandemic and the way consumer behavior changed and business behavior changed. And so the ability for companies to find people with the skills at this moment they need is a challenge. And it's one that we can respond to. Our community colleges have really been remarkable in partnering with us and others in the private sector in particular to better understand the needs of industries and to adjust their curriculum to meet these needs. Our community colleges recognized there were something like 70,000 job postings for positions that required cloud computing skills, just for one example. And yet none of our community colleges just 3 or 4 years ago were really offering cloud computing skills courses or certificates. And now most of them do across this region because they partnered with Amazon Web Services. They partnered with local high schools and had dual enrollment programs to have students go through a 4-course curriculum to prepare for cloud computing skills that are really necessary across any enterprise, large or small, public or private. So we need to do more of that to recognize the pace of change. It's been said that the pace of change is faster today than ever before in our economy and will never again be as slow as it is today. That's a challenge to all of us in educational and government and community institutions to keep up with that pace of change and ensure that our young people and our adults are provided with the information, the data, the skills, the pathways to the jobs of the future.
Thank you, Bill. Dr. Hall, you've all persuaded us that the achievement gaps start at birth if we don't address them better. And so we're so proud that First 5 LA is a full partner of the LA Compact and that we're all supporting better investments and support of our infants and toddlers. With that, we know we have a mixed delivery system, as we often call it. We have home-based care. Obviously, we have paid family leave, first as the parent care, and then home-based care and center-based care and in district and other forms of informal care. With that, it brings a lot of challenges around data because the data sits in so many places, unlike in K-12 where you have a single entity. Can you talk a little bit about those challenges and what are some of our opportunities to better understand the data that will tell us what's happening with our infants and toddlers?
Sure, David. So as you were saying, unlike the public K-12 system in which, individual schools are part of larger districts, the ECE system is much more fragmented. Most early learning programs are independently owned and operated. We do have some that are part of school districts, but there is no centralized data system or other mechanism for collecting and tracking information, standardized information about the children and families that are served by these programs. This presents a unique challenge because it's often hard to get specific information about the children who are participating in these programs, information like their demographics and their family characteristics, but also information about how they're doing developmentally. Individual schools conduct their own types of assessments to understand how children are doing in terms of their academic skills, as well as social, emotional, and physical development. So it's very difficult for us to understand how children are developing in their very early years over time and what that means for their trajectory in later years. I think the work that's happening around a Cradle-to-Career data system presents a very unique opportunity. One of the biggest things that we have missing or that we see as being missing in early childhood is a unique identifier. So often when children enter the K-12 system, they're assigned a unique identifier that follows them throughout their educational experience and even into post-secondary education. We hope with the advent of a Cradle-to-Career data system that we can start to assign unique identifiers much earlier on so that we're able to see how children are developing throughout early childhood and the relationship into the future. As I said, I think the Cradle to Career effort provides that opportunity. I think it still remains to be seen logistically how we can make that happen when these early childhood programs are not connected. Not all of them are publicly funded. So there still are several challenges in terms of us having the ability to get information about the very young children at an early age.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. And we did, some of you know, join with many others and advocated for a full longitudinal data system in California that is triggered off of what you said, having a unique identifier that we can use to follow students from K-12 to community college to university. But as you said, absent something that is also allows us to understand what's happening with our babies as they move into preschool, it would still not be a whole system. And the state has agreed that that's important, but they have put it in future phases. So I would encourage all of you to encourage the state and the governor to not delay the birth to 5 component of our Cradle to Career data system, as it's referred to. So I'm gonna come back to you, Chancellor Rodriguez. You know, one of the things the compact is really designed to do is to help us think like a system, like Dr. Pasteur said, the us, in that it's all about all of us working together for young people to thrive. And I know you're very committed to that. The connective data is sort of relates to the connective work, like dual enrollment or transfer. And I wonder if you talk a little bit about the importance of the connection work and the data that sort of would reflect that that's happening or not happening.
Well, thank you for that question. So it's an important one. Well, first, I described this, I think it was described by our panelists as well, as an ecosystem. And we have to look at ourselves as interdependent parts, not independent parts, even though we have our own policies and governance systems and local policies, local resourcing models, et cetera. This dashboard and this opportunity that we have in Los Angeles, look at ourselves as a region, as an ecosystem. Look at all the children that are in our public schools, the over 80 colleges and universities that make up LA. You combine all of that, there's no larger ecosystem in this country. We combine all of that together. So it really provides for us an opportunity to show, demonstrate, and to appeal to, I think, multiple audiences. This is to invest in this ecosystem. So I believe that interagency data sharing becomes super important. And I understand the concerns around privacy and concerns around other security and those sorts of things. We need to be concerned with that, but to the extent that we could track an educational pattern that leads to colleges and leads to careers, I think will serve us very well. What this allows us to do in looking at ourselves as an ecosystem is to find out where the equity gaps really are and to disaggregate those equity gaps in such a way that we could devise very specific interventions and then measure those interventions to also see whether we're making progress. Equally important in these kinds of data discussions and data disaggregation discussions is to allow us to have to answer the very bold question, what do we stop doing? So much of our discussion is about what is that we can do. You get a lot of smart people around a table or a Zoom, and you start having all kinds of solutions orientation, which is powerful and exciting. But why don't we ask ourselves with equal zeal, what do we stop doing that hasn't worked as well, that hasn't served children and our students well? Why don't we divest in those areas and reinvest in those areas that we know can make a market difference? Why don't we invest in areas that can spur innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship in such a way that corresponds to 21st century learning? What I get concerned about is that we still have very much 20th century data systems, data models, policies, even leadership expectations that are for an educational system, including higher education, that is clearly outdated. We are in a pivot. We are at an inflection point in this country. The issue of access, equity, inclusion, recovery is top of mind. And I believe that we here in Los Angeles can be a model for what the future could look like. An inclusive, equitable economy that includes all, where irrespective of zip code, station in life, income, everybody has an opportunity to excel, and that we expect that expectation to occur, and that through data we hold ourselves incredibly accountable to those outcomes.
Thank you, Chancellor. One of our compact initiatives that came from the post-secondary partners and LAUSD was to understand more of the transfer degrees, associate degrees for transfer. And you all shared data confidentially with each other. And it revealed that African-American students are not benefiting from transfer degrees at anywhere near the rate for Latinx or Caucasian or Asian students. Kelly, I know as you looked at African-American student achievement, it led the board to adopt a Black student achievement plan. And I wonder if you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we actually recently had a presentation on the implementation of the Black Student Achievement Plan. And there was a clear focus on data and what we could measure in terms of progress, even early on in its implementation. So the background there is in the wake of George Floyd's murder, the board back in June of 2020 voted to divest from the school police department and invest, $36 million in the creation of a Black Student Achievement Plan to recognize just the historic inequities and continuing inequities for Black students in our public schools in Los Angeles, and the unacceptable opportunity and achievement gaps that we continue to see them face, which we know have grown only during the pandemic. We actually then increased that investment much more to close to $100 million in the June 21 budget, so the 21-22 school year budget. And these funds are being invested at our schools with the highest populations of Black students, but also with higher rates of chronic absenteeism or struggles with regard to student achievement. And those funds are being used, one, to invest in greater socio-emotional supports for our students, because part of this was a response to the trauma and the impact of having police on campus in our secondary schools. So we're investing in psychiatric social workers and counselors to help really be holistic and have a restorative approach to student discipline issues rather than a policing approach. We're also have invested in a curriculum audit to ensure that not just through the provision of ethnic studies, which we've been a leader in LA Unified, but that across the curriculum that our students really see themselves and their stories and our community's contributions accurately reflected, and that it's not always coming from a Eurocentric point of view. We have also invested in partnerships. So really with great community organizations who do critical work to support our students holistically, to expand those partnerships and ensure that our students have those wraparound supports, whether they're physically on a school campus or they're home at their homes or they're in the community. Already we're seeing both improvements in reading and math at these school sites, but also socio-emotional improvements when we look at data like chronic absenteeism and attendance rates. And that is at a time, as we've reopened our schools this school year, where we've been facing unprecedented challenges, the Delta variant, the Omicron variant, all of these operational challenges. So the fact that even with that, with staffing vacancies, that we've been able to see the needle move in some significant ways for our Black students, I think is just a huge testament to the great work that's being done. But it's just the first step. And, we need to continue and to intensify those efforts moving forward because our kids deserve more and better, and they deserve it now.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you for your leadership on that. So I'll go to a question that came from the audience, and it was a similar question I was going to ask. I'm going to start with you, Bill. Francisco teed it up a little bit on the digital divide that has been laid bare through COVID. And so invite you to talk a little bit about your perspective on that. And also I'll invite all of our colleagues to, after you do, it relates to one of the questions of what are we doing to provide technology? What should we be doing to provide technology and connectivity to our students, cradle to career? But Bill, why don't you go first?
I appreciate that, David. I saw in the Q&A other questions related to what skills are in demand, and technology skills generally are in very high demand. and access to technology is essential for someone to develop technological skills. Not all of our high schools offer computer science, and too many in our lower income communities offer little or no computer science courses and have insufficient number of computing devices for the students even on the campuses. And we have to do a better job with computer science. We're in a knowledge-based economy, a technology-driven economy, and we've got to do a better job with that. We knew before the pandemic hit that we had tremendous disparities in access to internet technology in people's households. But we didn't realize the extent to which that was going to impact people's ability to work, learn, access telehealth, connect with government benefits, vote, register to vote, all the things that we need to do to be productive members of society were limited in those households that did not have access. And those households totaled about 1.2 million of our neighbors, over 400,000 households. Over 1.2 million of our neighbors here in LA County do not have high-speed internet access in their homes. Our schools, community colleges, other educational institutions did a heroic job providing devices and hotspots, but those were relatively stopgap solutions. We need more permanent solutions to ensure true digital equity. Every household, regardless of income level, geography, race, ethnicity, needs to have high-speed, affordable internet access. And Unite LA and the LADC co-convened a group called the LA Digital Equity Action League. It has brought together hundreds of public and private partners, including our school systems and higher education institutions, local governments, the ISPs themselves, healthcare institutions, community-based organizations who've been the greatest champions for digital equity in underserved communities. And we're now working with the state as the official regional broadband consortium for Los Angeles County to address these infrastructure gaps, device gaps, digital literacy gaps, and affordability challenges that are faced by so many in our community. So it is absolutely essential that we reach ubiquitous broadband availability in people's households. But even beyond that, use this accessibility, use this technology to train people for the skills and jobs that are in demand, because there are many well-paying jobs available here in Los Angeles County that with sufficient technology training, all of our neighbors throughout this county could be acquiring and succeeding in those jobs.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you for being our partner on the LA deal. And your leadership in this space is spectacular. Kelly, any comments you want to make about the issue of the digital divide and technology?
Well, I think Bill covered a lot of this, but when the pandemic began, I think we discovered that about a fifth of our, so approximately 100,000 of our 500,000 families in LA Unified did not have sufficient connectivity at home. And as Bill noted, we have provided a device, a laptop or tablet, and a hotspot to every student and family who needs it in LA Unified. But indeed, we have seen that the connectivity that's available through hotspots is not enough for much of the work that's required, whether that was through remote learning or now as we've returned to in-person learning. And so we are really thrilled to be part of the LA deal and this ongoing work about how do we address these broader connectivity challenges. The one thing I would add is just as a school system, I think it's been a challenge to ensure that as we've returned to our classrooms and our campuses, that we're not simply trying to turn back the clock to March of 2020 in terms of our instructional approaches. Because if we want to get to a future, as Bill articulated, where all of our students are engaging in computer science, where they're really developing the computing skills, the creativity skills that are necessitated by 21st century jobs, doing workshops in your classroom in the same way that we did, 10, 20 years ago, worksheets, is not going to suffice. And I think as I visited schools, there's been a tendency to try to revert to, a pre-pandemic instructional approaches when that's not what our kids need for their futures. And so I think as a school system, it's really important for us to continue to orient ourselves that we have to maintain those pieces that worked and were an improvement in the pandemic and in remote learning, but also when it comes to like having a device refresh plan when it comes to sufficiently training our staff on what does pedagogy look like when you're using devices in a meaningful way, and the inclusion of families in this work. So both how can we ensure they have the devices and connectivity they need, but also how can we provide learning opportunities so they feel like they can support their kids with learning. So there's, in addition to the infrastructure issues, there's some deep learning and professional development that we need to deal with and to ensure that we can keep moving forward on that front.
Thank you, Kelly. And I just would want to shout out your chief technology leadership. Soheil has been a spectacular partner for Bill and I, and he taught us that the district over 10 years has built an extremely high quality fiber ring around the city, connecting all the schools, and in a very compact like way, if I can use that term, wants to partner with the city of Los Angeles and the county to extend that reach into the neighborhood surrounding these schools, and yet needs all our help and our collaboration to do that. So we just want to shout that out. We really support that leadership and collaboration by LAUSD's leadership. And it's the kind of thing that gets back to Manuel Pastor's comments that it has to be us first. Francisco Rodriguez, Chancellor Rodriguez, any comments you want to make around technology or digital divide?
I do. That this is a great subject, and I'm glad we're talking about this. You know, the future is diverse, and the future is digital. And to the extent that we can assist all members of our community to have access, reliable, consistent access and connectivity, we will all be better served. It's not just for educational purposes, but for every aspect of life, including healthcare and mental health, which our students have access. We've had to transition essential services to a digital platform, including financial aid and counseling. And again, I mentioned the importance of mental health that many of our staff have and students have addressed. We've also learned tremendous inefficiencies over the last 100 weeks, and using technology to bridge some of those inefficiencies in service, in speed at which a product can be delivered, a service can be delivered, and to try to do it in a way that is empathetic, caring, and indeed inclusive. So we've learned quite a bit about the digitization of not just teaching and learning, but also the essential services that wrap around the whole college experience. The digital divide, it could be also the digital capacity can also be a great equalizer and a great emancipator, instead of one that has divided and exacerbated some of the disparities and inequities that we've been discussing. So our future is indeed digital. So our ability to have capacity through tools, through connectivity, and through computation and the use of said tools, I think is going to be important for our future. A person who is not connected is literally disconnected from society and all the opportunities that it will provide. So we want an inclusive, equitable, democratic recovery and democratic prosperity that includes all. The digitization and technology elements have to be right alongside of it. It's not just a tool, it's an essential and central tool.
And I wonder, Bill, I might come back to you for a quick question, and I'm going to come to you, Kimberly. But Bill, Francisco reminds me of there's no longer just sort of jobs that are technology jobs, and everything else is a non-technology job. As you know, the research around how many jobs have become digitalized has changed for like a nurse that now has to have digital skills because she has to interact with those devices. I wonder if you just comment a little bit about that trajectory. You already referenced it, but go a step deeper. You're on mute, yeah.
Yeah,
There you go.
I gotta learn to use this technology. Think about the way all of our lives and enterprises are different today than they were before the pandemic or even a decade ago. Think about the way we're communicating today on a Zoom platform. Think about the way we communicate internally and externally in our organizations. Think about the way we operate our enterprises. Think about the way we measure our progress in our organizations. All of this is technology dependent. Technology really is reaching into every corner of our lives and our economy, and therefore having a facility with technology is essential for our success economically and for our health and well-being. And therefore, making conscious investments from the earliest ages I've argued for quite some time that it's important for students to speak more than one language, whether that language is English, that language is Spanish, or any other language. It's important for people to speak more than one language. I also think it's important for people to understand programming languages, and maybe programming languages should be an essential part of our early education. The extent to which we enable people to operate in an advanced technology environment, in a world of automation where jobs that require fairly routine skills are being replaced by automation, that creates some displacement of people without the skills necessary to compete with automated technology, but it creates opportunities for people with those skills to be more productive in partnership with technology. And companies that become more productive can invest better wages, better benefits in their workers who are able to work alongside advanced technology. And think about every major industry that drives the LA economy. The entertainment industry was an analog industry. It now digitally creates its content, distributes its content, exhibits its content. Think about space commercialization. Think of the digitization of the healthcare industry. Think about advanced transportation, advanced manufacturing. Really, every key industry with well-paying jobs and good career pathways is increasingly dependent on technology. So the extent to which we commit to that, I think, will be the extent to which we help people live really well-paid, comfortable lives in the future. And let me just add one more thought. Oh shoot, I lost it. I'll let it go. There was one more thought.
You'll get one more crack at this. Well, so let's do a popcorn round, and I'm going to start with you, Dr. Hall. And so this will be our wrap up. So just be concise. And I want to just ask you to think about, if you could wave a magic wand, what kind of systems-wide solution would you like to see implemented that could cause breakthroughs for our young people to thrive? So Dr. Hall, what would be that magic genie solution you would put out?
Early childhood would really like to see systems that support children and families really working together. Our children often encounter the healthcare system, the school system, early learning system, a variety of public systems, but oftentimes they don't receive services in a way that are really responsive to their needs. And the services are fragmented, they're disjointed, they don't, one system doesn't know how another system is supporting a family. And so if we can start to, really have common goals for the outcomes that we want to see for children and families and how we can best support them and work in concert with one another to support them in ways that optimize their development, I think we'd see a lot of improvements across the board in terms of how families experience systems, but also how they are supported and how the children develop.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Kelly, what would be your wish?
Well, similar to what we've discussed, I would streamline information sharing and service delivery so that our early education, P to 12 and postgraduate partners could have access to reliable data that we could better use to inform our practices. And I think, as Dr. Hall teed up, ways to better connect the services that we provide to the very same kids and families, just in different sectors. I think we've got great examples of that we've done with the Department of Children and Family Services with regard to our foster youth, and with the city with regard to workforce development, but we need to do that more systemically to better serve our K-12 students.
Thank you, Kelly. Chancellor Rodriguez?
I could wave a magic wand. I'd like to see 100% college attendance of all persons in LA County, and in particular from LAUSD. I've made a pledge to President Gomez that every single high school senior who graduates, even those who don't graduate, have a seat at any one of our 9 community colleges. We have a model, national model, in our LA College Promise program, where we've seen increases in attendance, persistence, graduation, college level English and math, because it's not just about free tuition, it's all the wraparound services. Put our students in the right environment, the right instruction, with the right curriculum, our students excel. We need to make sure that that happens to every single student, but it's not happenstance, but that is an opportunity where every child, every student succeeds in college. So that's what I would love to see, because that leads to greater prosperity, leads to greater economic inclusiveness, in a greater, I think our democratization, frankly, depends on the ability of all its participants to participate. So that's what I would love to see and have our data set point us in that particular direction. While more students you've seen are going and completing, going through, not enough attention is being paid to those who don't go to college. Without a college education, you're going to be left out and really subject to indentured servitude for low-paying jobs. And that's simply usually relegated to brown, black, and poor people. And we need to change that narrative here in Los Angeles.
Thank you, Chancellor Rodriguez. That's a very inspiring way to think about it. It reminds me of Dr. Francis Gibson, our former chief academic officer, who wanted to say we should be a city of graduates, right? We should be a county of graduates. Bill Allen, what would you do with your magic wand?
A much deeper engagement from and with employers, whether in the public or private sector, with our education and workforce development systems to help inform the shaping of curriculum, to help students with career exploration, to help provide work-based learning opportunities. As I said at the beginning of my remarks, we are a talent-driven economy here in Los Angeles, and the extent to which we remain a world-class economy. We are a nation-size economy. Among the 20 largest national economies in the world is LA County. But the extent to which we retain that position and grow that position is the extent to which we invest in the talent of the future. So our industry partners engaging with our education partners on a regular, meaningful, mutually beneficial basis to ensure better student outcomes at every age in our communities.
Thank you, Bill. So let's leave it with that. I want to respect everyone's time. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to all of you participants that joined this event today. I'm inspired. We at the United LA always believed that there was some kind of greater possibility if we ended the blame game and we went into the collaboration zone. And I think Dr. Pasteur said it perfectly. If we can think of us first instead of me first, and that the systems work for the kids, not the kids for the systems, we can make something greater for all of our young people. And I would just encourage all of our participants to check out the LA Compact Dashboard and use it to drive change. And that's the whole point, is for us to do it, but in a collaborative way. As I said, we see data as a tool, not a weapon. And I hope all of you as our Compact partners know and trust us as such. And I'll just end with saying, Bill Allen, representing the employer community, has really represented it in the way we would want, which is not saying to all of you in the Cradle-to-Career system, you're not giving us the graduates we need. It's we need to be with you to support their success and be part of that every step of the way. So thank you again to all the panelists. Thank you to Southern California Grantmakers for helping us put today's event together. And with that, I wish you all adieu.